I actually recall the episode of that day as though it happened yesterday. Indeed, even today, my hands begin shaking when I discuss it. I am Kiera, a well-known influencer of beauty tips and lifestyle blogs. That day, I had organized a meet and greet with my fans in a small, charming cafe in my city. Fans gathered around me to take selfies and ask for advice. I was so happy to see so much love for me from people. Then I saw him. He seemed different from everyone else. His hair was messy, his lashes soaked in tears, and he had a strange, evil grin. He waited for the crowd to disperse before approaching me. "Kiera, you look even more beautiful up close," he said. His voice was unsettling, and his eyes were intense. I nodded and forced a smile, hoping he would understand and move on, but he didn't. "Do you remember me? We used to be very close." "I'm sorry, I don't think we've ever met." His eyes darkened, and he leaned closer, whispering, "You don't even remember your husband?" I felt a cold sweat run down my back. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else," I said, trying to maintain composure. He started laughing, even as people around us began moving away from him. "No, my love, enough with the jokes. You still don't get it, but you are my wife." He was clearly deranged. "Please, leave me alone," I said, my voice shaking. His behavior quickly shifted from unsettling to dangerous. I signaled the cafe staff, who immediately intervened and threw him out. He struggled and protested the entire time, making disgusting and threatening remarks. The room fell silent, and I tried to calm myself. Just moments later, as I began to relax, the door suddenly flew open again. This time, Gil returned, but with 2 guns in his hands. He opened fire. The cafe descended into chaos. People started screaming, and bullets flew in all directions. I was paralyzed with fear. The scene was horrific, bodies were falling, and blood was pooling on the floor. I ducked under a table, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Gil's eyes were wild, his mouth twisted into a crazed grin. "You can't hide from me, Kiera," he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. I stayed as still as possible, slowly moving toward the back exit. A bullet grazed my ear, tearing through the wall behind me. Pain shot through my ear, and I saw blood soaking my shirt. I screamed, but the instinct to survive pushed me forward. Desperately, I made my way to the kitchen, hoping to find a way out, but Gil was relentless. He kicked the door open, and our eyes met. "So, here you are, my love." He raised his gun, and I thought for sure it was the end. Suddenly, a loud noise distracted him. A brave man stood up to him, strong and determined. He slammed Gil against the stainless steel counter, and the gun fell to the floor. Gil screamed, throwing wild punches, but the man fought back, grabbing a pan and swinging it at Gil's shoulder. Gil cried out in pain, but he wasn't done. He lunged for a large knife on the counter. The man tried to defend himself, but the knife tore his shirt, leaving a small cut. They wrestled violently, blood staining their clothes. I remember Gil grabbing a pot of boiling water and throwing it at the man's face. Steam hissed, and the man screamed in agony. The boiling water spread over his face and chest, but even through the pain, he didn't give up. He kicked Gil's knee, making him stumble. Taking advantage of the moment, the man punched Gil hard, sending him crashing into the utensils. Gil scrambled for the gun, and the man followed, both of them punching and kicking each other. I was frozen, trying to regain control of my body. Then, Gil smashed a broken bottle into the man's arm, and blood poured out. Covered in blood and burns, the man tackled Gil, pinning him down. Both were exhausted, and the kitchen was in shambles, dishes and utensils everywhere, the stench of old food filling the air. But then, Gil grabbed the gun and shot the man. The man collapsed to the ground, lifeless, and I screamed in terror. Finally breaking free from the shock, I ran out of there before Gil could focus on me again. Outside, I heard more screams as the police arrived. I collapsed on the pavement, the world spinning around me. The officers stormed the cafe, and after a few moments of gunfire, everything went quiet. They had taken down my deranged stalker. But by then, I had already made up my mind. I was done with social media. I didn't want to be an influencer anymore. Music. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal. I'm a YouTuber specializing in simple challenges, and my channel has gained a decent following. My newest adventure brought me to the outskirts of my town, which was known for sightings of the ghost of the Virgin Bride, a young woman from the 1800s who was mysteriously found dead on her wedding night. She said to wander the woods, searching for her groom. I wanted to capture the experience on camera and see if the legend was true. I brought my trusty dog, Max, with me and started vlogging as we entered the dense forest. The sun was setting, and there was a faint smell of damp earth in the air. Alright guys, we're heading deep into the woods where the Virgin Bride was spotted 2 days ago. A farmer from my town was taking a shortcut through here when he says he saw the ghost. I'm here with Max, and we're camping overnight. Wish us luck. We walked for hours until we found a suitable spot to camp. The sun had completely set, and the forest was eerily quiet. I set up the tent and lit a fire to calm the growing sense of unease. It's getting dark, and the woods are starting to look really creepy, but we're here to see if the rumors are true. I've got my camera and flashlight, and so does Max. Let's see what happens. After a few hours, I suddenly heard a faint crying sound in the distance. Max's ears perked up, and he started growling softly. Guys, did you hear that crying sound? Okay, this is getting really weird. I grabbed my flashlight and tried to scan the area around the camp. The crying continued, this time closer, and along with it, I heard soft whistling. My heart began to race, but I kept calm for the video. Okay, we're hearing some strange sounds. I really wish I wasn't alone out here. Max's growl turned into a bark. He was looking at something just beyond the glow of the fire. I tried to look too, but I couldn't see anything. Still, I felt like we were being watched. Max is on high alert. What's out there, buddy? Do you see something? I stood up and walked over to where Max was focused. My hands were shaking, and the camera trembled in my grip. Max started whimpering, and the darkness around us seemed to close in. Then, I saw her, a woman in white, standing off in the distance. My blood ran cold. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The figure was pale and transparent, slowly moving toward us. I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder, as if someone had grabbed me. I screamed, dropping the camera. Run, Max. Run. I grabbed Max's leash and stumbled through the bushes. The shadowy figure glided effortlessly along the rough path behind us. The crying turned into wails, and the whistling morphed into a bone-chilling scream. I tripped on a root and fell hard, scraping my knee. Blood was running down my leg, but I forced myself to get up. We finally made it out of the woods, and I dared to look back. The figure stood by the trees, her face hidden beneath a veil. She reached out her hand but couldn't cross the boundary of the forest. I collapsed on the ground, clutching Max. The night fell silent once again, but the panic inside me didn't subside. I realized my camera was still running and had captured the entire encounter. We did it. We really did it. I don't know what that was, but it's real. Wow. The Virgin Bride is real, guys. I hope we got this on camera. I looked at Max. He was licking my face, his tail wagging. We had escaped, but the memory of the ghost of the Virgin Bride was going to haunt me forever. I closed the video by saying, I'm never coming back here again. But the next day, when I reviewed the footage, I was shocked. Every time I pointed the camera toward the ghost, the image became blurry. Still, the shadow was clearly visible. The camera had captured her, a transparent, crying, tortured figure. I don't know the full history of that place, but now I know for sure that ghosts exist. Later that night, I received a message from an account with no profile picture and only one follower. You looked very beautiful in your blue nightgown last night. My heart raced. I hadn't posted any pictures of myself in a nightgown, and I lived alone. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a lucky guess or a cruel joke, but the unease settled deep within me. Who are you? How do you know? Yet again, I was worrying quickly. There was no answer. I attempted to go through my day regularly, yet the sensation of being watched by somebody was still there. I was receiving messages from various accounts. Each message was more upsetting than the previous one. Do you recall that red dress you wore? I wore it on my first date with Ryan. My blood ran cold. Ryan was a person I dated for some time before things turned sour, and then I ended the relationship. I haven't thought about him in years. How does he know? Leave me alone. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house startled me. Around midnight, I received a message. You can't ignore me forever. I threw my phone with force, and it fell far away. My hands were shaking. That's it. I blocked that account and decided to put my phone on silent. When I lay on the bed and looked at the empty ceiling, there was silence in the house. Finally, I nodded off, but the sound of footsteps woke me up. I sat up and started listening carefully. The sound of footsteps was slow, coming from the hallway outside my room. Who is it? I called. There was no response. I grabbed my phone and turned on the light. The light from the phone cut through the darkness. The sound of footsteps continued, signaling that they were getting closer. My heart began to race. The floor was freezing as I got out of bed. I walked to the door and opened it, which only illuminated the hallway. There was no one outside. The air got colder with each step I took. I was certain something was there. I'm calling 911. I shouted. Suddenly, I saw a shadow in the hallway. I screamed loudly, and in my panic, the phone fell from my hand with a clack, the light scattering everywhere. I grabbed the phone and rushed back to my room. I shut the door and called for help. Hello, 911, please send someone. There's someone in my house. But then, I heard a raspy male voice cut in between. Sorry, 911 isn't available right now. Should I call your best friend, the one you brought on our last date? I was stunned. The temperature of the room dropped. I could see my breath, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. The door started shaking as if someone was trying to break it down. It can't be him. I remembered that a few days after I broke things off with Ryan, he had hanged himself. I hid in a corner, trembling. The banging grew louder, and the groaning noises surrounded me. All at once, the door flung open, and a shadow stood before me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but in the faint light from the hallway, I saw the dark figure inching towards me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain on my side, like I had been cut. I looked down and saw blood seeping from the wound. I pressed my hand against it, trying to stop the bleeding. I staggered to my feet and ran toward the door, but the shadow blocked my way. It was then that I realized who it was. Dark, blood-filled eyes that didn't look human at all, and a twisted face, but the smell, it was Ryan's scent. I turned and ran toward the window. I tried to break it. I managed to get out and climbed onto the roof. The cold night breeze stung my skin, but I didn't care. I needed to get away. I climbed down, slipping and scraping my hands on the rough wood, then fell hard to the ground. The pain was unbearable. My legs started bleeding, but I limped down the street without daring to look back. When I reached the sidewalk, I looked behind me, and there he was, Ryan, standing at my window, staring at me before disappearing right in front of my eyes. I knew it was his ghost. I didn't stop running until I reached the neighbor's house. I knocked on their door, and when they let me in,